What is up, guys, and welcome back to the Photo Finish, Scot Radio's home for motorsports in general and NASCAR in particular. I'm your host, Ben Schneider. Matt Cole is off tonight, but filling in for him is another hockey enthusiast who you might recognize here on Scot Radio from Bias Sports Talk, among other things, Chase Draus. Chase, thank you for filling in.
Yeah, no problem. It's weird, though. Usually I'm the one leading this one whenever you're here, so it's going to be interesting. I hope I don't step on any toes, but, it'll be good.
Well, Chase, I want to start with you and just ask first, you're here in the New England area. Have you ever been to New Hampshire Motor Speedway? And
yes, I have. New Hampshire Motor Speedway. It's actually very close to me. It's around a 30-minute drive. Been there a couple times. Never for an actual motorsporting event. I've helped volunteered. I've actually, Rene Rancourt. He was the one who sang for the Bruins, right? He sang the national anthem.
I think so.
Yeah, I met him at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. That was pretty cool. I parked his car. It was great. But yeah, it was a good time all around, and I saw a couple laps. Bunch of weird guys. You probably heard of them, like Kevin Weiss, someone. Man, it was a while ago. I was like freshman in high school, but it was a good time. And yeah, no, honestly, love the Speedway. In my opinion, it's one of the top 3 in the country, behind only Daytona and maybe Bristol. But yeah, honestly, New Hampshire Motor Speedway, it's a great place. I mean, I don't think we have a race coming up soon, but if you live in New England, it's definitely worth the price of admission. So,
well, it's great to have you here, Chase. So we'll start with some news from the past week, and the biggest news coming out of NASCAR is perhaps the fact that Jimmie Johnson and Chad-Knaus will be splitting up at the end of the 2018 season. Now, if you're an NFL fan, this is basically the equivalency of Tom Brady being split with Bill Belichick. Jimmie Johnson has been the Tom Brady to Chad-Knaus as Bill Belichick since 2002, 7 championships, over 80 wins together.
Oh, my goodness.
Chase, what's your reaction to that?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, it's hard because Jimmie Johnson is one of the best motor racers or the best auto racers of all time. I mean, there's no doubt about it in my mind that he's going to end up in the Hall of Fame. I mean, the man was untouchable for almost 10 years. I mean, the only person who maybe could have touched him, maybe, Jeff Gordon, maybe Dale Earnhardt, Jr. Just, I'm at a loss for words. I really am. And, I mean, obviously you said it was like the Belichick-Brady breakup, but I feel like it's a little bit more because it's just 8 championships. 8 championships, over 80 wins.
7 championships. They're going for their 8.
They're going for 8, but I mean, well, not anymore. But Jimmie Johnson's going for 8. But I mean, 7 championships.
Yes.
Just 80 wins. It hurts. I'm at a loss for words.
Well, they will be going for their 8th separately because Chad-Knaus will actually, he's not done. He'll be moving to William Byron's number 24 car. Byron was the Xfinity champion last year. He struggled a bit this year, but if I recall correctly, Jeff Gordon struggled a little bit in the 24 car in 1993. I think he turned out all right, so we'll see where that goes.
Just a little bit, just only a surefire Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Of course.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, as soon as Jimmie gets that 8th championship, he goes over and makes his own, team. It wouldn't surprise me because you think about it, he's got the knowledge of all the tracks. He's got. I think he might be going behind the scenes if he gets that 8th championship, but. Obviously, we're not going to figure that out for a while, but, anyway.
Yep, and the other big news over in Europe is Mick Schumacher, the son of Formula One legend Michael Schumacher, has won the Formula 3 championship. Now, Mick got off to a bit of a slower start this year, but the second half really turned it on, ended up winning 5 consecutive races, and top 2 finishes in 8 of the last 9, so really found his groove at the end of the year.
Well deserved. Congratulations on that, Mr. Schumacher?
Yes,
I'm trying not to say that wrong.
It's all right. Yeah, so Mick probably a surefire Formula One drive candidate. Maybe not next season, but in the coming years, certainly following his father's footsteps very well. Mm-hmm. And also, it's October 16th. I'd regret if I didn't bring up Dan Wheldon, who was killed 7 years ago today at the IndyCar season finale in Las Vegas. So Susie, his wife, and Sebastian Oliver, his 2 sons, were thinking about you and praying for you. I know this day's hard. For me, it was the first time I saw a fatality in a motor racing event live on television. It was one of the most difficult days in my life as a racing fan.
No one wants to see that. I mean, there are times where, I mean, you've seen the the YouTube videos of the brawls between racers and teams. You hear them talking smack, for a while, just on the media, now on Twitter, but no one wants a result like that. No one wants that to happen.
And Dan was one of the most highly respected guys in the paddock.
I mean, it sucks. It really does. But I mean, hopefully, through his passing, more safety regulations have been passed. And
he was actually the one who tested the new car, the new safer car.
Hey,
so it's a great legacy to have.
He passed doing what he loved, and through his passing, more lives will be saved. Through this, so it's terrible, but it wasn't in vain. So.
All right, so with that, let's get right into Talladega, the NASCAR weekend recap. So there was a truck race and a Monster Energy Cup race. So we'll start with the trucks. First two stages, not a whole lot happened. I think the only two cautions were for the stage breaks. As the third stage started, we had a pretty big accident. Chris Fontaine, Parker Kligerman, Matt Crafton, Ben Rhodes, several others involved. Kligerman taking the hardest hit, I think.
Truck series was always intense for me because, I can barely imagine having a race car like Indy, but just to have a truck where truck series always impressed me.
And Chris Fontaine's truck was 20 years old.
What?
Yeah, it had been
20 years old.
Gone
Dude,
under
that's
some
an antique.
modifications. Yeah, but it had won at Daytona before. Yes, and he was up there fighting for a top 3 spot.
Hey, you know what, dude?
Unfortunately, the wreck happened, but.
Dude, you know what? She still runs like a war horse. So I guess he made the right choice.
I think they're gonna retire the truck now after the accident.
No.
It was pretty beat up after that. But Noah Gragson leading on the final lap, got run into by Timothy Peters. I guess you could argue he was coming up or Peters was coming down or a combination of both. But they got together. Gragson spun out, collected a few trucks with him. And Timothy Peters, in his return to the Truck Series, he's only run 4 races this year. He lost his ride last season when his team shut down. But he went on to score the win. Obviously, being a part-timer, he's not involved in the playoffs. But Ben Rhodes and Stuart Friesen were the 2 drivers eliminated in this cutoff race. And now only 4 races to go for the Truck Series. They'll be back in Martinsville in a couple of weeks.
Hey, you know what? I'm not a big fan of the playoff, but you know what? To the guys who are in it, props. I feel bad for the guys who aren't in it, but, at the same time, it's motorsports. It's still sports. So there are winners, there are losers. I know you're probably sick of hearing this, but, as Lightning McQueen said it, one winner, however many losers. So
42 losers.
42 losers.
Will be 39 today since they've shortened the field a little bit since Cars was released in 2006, but
it's a
good mentality to live by. Even fewer trucks, actually, because trucks have shorter fields, but that's beside the point. So we move on to the Cup race, and this was one of the most interesting,
I'd say,
Talladega
controversial
races. Yeah. We'll get to the finish in a second, but just before that, Stewart-Haas Racing showed speed all weekend, qualified all 4 of their cars in the top 4, and they were able to form a 4-car train of cars and basically pull away from the rest of the pack. And that's something we haven't seen at Talladega in decades.
I saw this, and just the amount of coordination between all of those cars, it's incredible. It was just...
Yeah, the cars were perfectly in tandem, working very well together.
For those of you who say auto racing isn't a sport, dude, this is some mad coordination right here.
No.
This was impressive. I've been watching auto racing for a while, NASCAR, Formula 1, IndyCar for pretty close to 10, 15 years. This is probably the most impressive thing I've seen yet. So, I saw Jimmy Johnson win his 7th championship. So,
yeah, all 4 of them running up front toward the end of the race. And on the final lap, after there was a restart due to some accidents, because it's Talladega, there's always going to be a
there's at
big
least
wreck at the end of a race.
Three every year.
Yep.
That's how it works.
So coming into the final lap, just like what happened with the truck race, there was an accident, but it happened even further back this time. Pretty much as they were going into turn 1, Matt DiBenedetto got spun around, collecting about a half dozen cars with him. Now the Stewart-Haas cars were close on fuel. They weren't sure if they were going to be able to make it all the way. If NASCAR had thrown a caution on the final lap as they had for the truck race the day before, Kurt Busch would have backed his engine down, who was leading at the time, probably would have coasted around, had enough fuel to maintain minimum caution speed and cruise to victory.
Yeah.
But NASCAR held the caution flag, doing the opposite of what they did in the truck race the day before, and because of that, coming out of turn 4, Kurt Busch started to slow, fuel tank ran dry, and his teammate Aric Almirola snuck in to win the race.
This is one of those things where consistency is key. The best example I have is like a pitch count. If you're calling strikes, at the belt line to the knees, you got to keep doing that. But if all of a sudden, it's going to be the belly button for this pitcher because I honestly don't like the way he's, I don't like, what's going on here. There's got to be some foul play. I went to game 1 of the ALCS. The calls were horrendous. At one point, someone, I think it was either Sale or Joe Kelly threw a strike, and the only reason they got called a ball was because the umpire just could, he just stood up, I think it was Vasquez stood up and then squatted back down, and he's like, oh, ball. We're like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, you got to, it's like the catch rule too. Like, you got to be consistent with the catch rule, and like in the NFL, like if you keep changing things here and there, not only are the fans going to be ticked off, the racers are going to be ticked off, and ultimately, those are the two people you can't afford to have angry at the same time.
Well, Kurt Busch was a little ticked off, understandably so. He led 108 laps, so we'll play the clip right here. This is his post-race interview, and understandably not so happy with NASCAR. Here it is.
There's 2 missed calls, though, by NASCAR at the end. Why would we have an extra yellow flag lap? Beyond me. The track was ready to go. And at the end, once we cross the white flag, if there's a wreck and an ambulance needs to be dispatched, I've been on the other side of that where I was racing coming back to win the race, and they said, well, we had to dispatch an ambulance. There was 2 cars dead in the water down there. Chase Elliott's safety is of my concern, and so was the 32 car. And so it's a human call. There's rules that need to be stricter at the end of these races, but man, what a monster Ford. Led a lot of laps. I tried to stay positive. I said, there's going to be restarts at the end. We need to save fuel. I did everything I could in my power on my checklist. Just got to thank Doug Yates for the power to lead all these laps today. It's a very different Talladega for me. And I really enjoyed leading the race, working with my teammates. I'm really happy that Stewart-Haas car won. The 4 of us, I've never seen so much synergy. And we knew we were going to have to race when we got to Kansas. It just would have been nice to have the win. We're here to win. That's what Monster Energy wants. Thanks to those guys. That's what Gene Haas wants. Thanks to Gene, Tony Stewart, everybody. But there was 2 human element calls there at the end. I don't know why we ran an extra lap under yellow and why there wasn't the yellow for a dispatch of an ambulance.
So Kurt brings up another good point.
Safety.
Safety is one, but also after the caution was put out, they ran 5 laps of yellow for a relatively minor accident.
As soon as they deploy release the ambulance, it's like, we'll just let them go. Like, dude, you kidding me?
But the week before at Dover is a track that's only 40% the size of Talladega. There was also an accident in late race restart. They also only had 5 laps. It also only took them 5 laps to clean up the accident. So if you can clean it up in 5 laps at Dover, you should be able to do it 3 or 4 most easily at Talladega. And that extra caution lap, again, is probably one of the things that costs Kurt Busch the win.
Yeah. Consistency is key, as I mentioned before, so I'm not going to go on that rant again. But if you're not going to call a clean race like that, Kurt Busch, he held himself very professionally. But he had every right to be angry. Had that been me, I probably would have been up in arms, like, are you kidding me? But that's my opinion. So
for Kurt Busch, I think he handled it.
But
relatively well.
We got to give credit to Almirola. I cannot say his name.
Almirola.
Getting a win.
Yes.
And it was a phenomenal performance on his part. But you got some stats here.
Almirola drives the 10 car. Now that 10 car has been occupied the last 5 seasons by Danica Patrick. In those 5 seasons, Danica Patrick had a total of 0 top 5s, 7 top 10s, a best finish of 6th at Atlanta in 2014, and only 64 laps led in equipment that Kevin Harvick was taking to the Final Four in the championship on a yearly basis. 2018, Aric Almirola steps into the ride. This season already, 3 top 5s, 13 top 10s, 1 more top 10. He'll have double the amount of Danica in 5 seasons, and only 1 season for him, and 181 laps led. He actually led more laps, I think, in New Hampshire earlier this year in 1 race than Danica led in her entire career.
What's it say? I mean, this kind of goes into, like the W Series, where we're going to have, an all-women race.
We'll talk about the W Series a lot more coming up.
Really, I think Danica was overhyped. I think she was rushed. I think she should have spent a lot more time in development. I mean, it's tough because, Danica being the figure she is, she was a cash grab for a while with GoDaddy and, several other commercials and stuff like that. But, they're like, oh, yeah, look at her. Yeah, she's in the race. It's like, gender aside, she should have been in development more. She needed to grow as a racer. I mean, the same can be said for, a lot of other auto racers. Sometimes, when they're young, hungry, and, they got a lot of hype behind them, they get pushed way too early. You got to let your players develop. So.
All right, so we'll move on now to the K&N West race at All-American Speedway in Roseville. So Cole Rouse, who was on the receiving end of a bump and run 2 weeks ago at Meridian, finally got his first career win for Bill McAnally Racing. Ryan Partridge led the most laps, and Chris Eggleston, who was making his series return for Bill McAnally Racing, who was a former champion for them a few years ago, he was leading the race and had a mechanical issue, crashed out unfortunately. And Hailie Deegan, who was in the headlines a lot last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, for her victory, had a bit of a rough night, some aggressive driving, rattled a few cages, as Dale Earnhardt might say, eventually received a 1-lap penalty for her rough driving.
It's always the worst when you get a penalty like that, because I mean, obviously there needs to be them, but just getting that call, from your manager, hey, you have a 1-lap penalty, it was just like, are you kidding me?
It's a shame Matt's not here this week to react to that. Of course, him being a big Deegan fan. I also want to ask NBC, where are your tweets about Cole Rouse, and is he going to be on NASCAR America later this week like Hailie Deegan was? And also, Lionel, where's your diecast pre-order? I want to get in on that. Yeah, both of those are obviously jokes. Neither one's going to happen. We talked about that last week, the media attention that Deegan's been getting relative to the lack of attention the series as a whole and the other drivers have been getting.
I mean, I've given up hope with the media. Ultimately they're gonna push what they think will sell. So whether it's a big crash at a race, that's gonna get that's gonna get a lot of attention. Female drivers, because obviously this is a predominantly male sport, that's gonna get a lot of attention. But it's not going to be for the sake of the sport. And honestly, that's where I feel like it's been lacking. I mean, obviously, I don't care who you are. If you're talented, you're talented. And if you win, congratulations. But it's got to be, the sport's got to be first, not, a political agenda. Because honestly, it's the moment you put politics in sports, it's just a mess. So.
Well, speaking of politics, I'm sure we'll
talk
about that a little bit here.
Oh, boy, we're getting into my show.
So, the W Series was just announced over in Europe. It's going to be the first female exclusive single-seater championship beginning in 2019, starting exclusively in Europe with the idea that as the series grows, they'll continue to expand and have races worldwide. So Chase, I want to get your take on this. This has received very mixed reactions, very strong mixed reactions from both sides. How do you feel about this? Is this a positive step or a negative step?
I feel like it's not going to be a step we can really tell until we see it, once we get the ball rolling. Obviously, this is massive progress, in terms of having an all-female, auto racing, giving them a lot more of the spotlight as, this is a predominantly male sport.
I agree that it's well-intentioned.
However, at the same time, it's kind of like the way the UFC handled the whole gender, division, they literally just made separate weight classes. It's not, they're not, oh yeah, the female heavyweight championship, or oh yeah, the, female. No, it's just a flyweight champion. Like, they handled it with class. But at this rate, I'm not sure how I feel about it, with the separate part. However, a lot of people see this as a good thing. I'm going to wait until, it gets the ball rolling, see how it does, in terms of, the quality of racing. Because, honestly, Danica Patrick was one of the, when she was in IndyCar, she was one of the most electric racers ever.
Well, and one of Pippa Mann, who's another IndyCar driver, usually races the 500 every year part-time. She's been one of the most outspoken critics of this, arguing that we've proven that we can race as equals. Hailie Deegan just proved that they can race as equals last week out in Meridian.
That's the other thing.
And say what you will about Danica and her underperformance compared to her teammates. She won an IndyCar race. She led laps at Indianapolis. She led laps at Daytona, and she was around for nearly 200 Cup races.
I think
she wasn't the lead, but she proved that she could hang.
Yeah, and I think right now, if anything, this is probably just going to be a starting block for a lot of young women's career. And in that regard, great, because development is key. And eventually, hey, this girl's coming up. She's really talented. All right, let's put her in an Xfinity race, see how she does. In terms of that, great. However, if you guys are going to start they're going to start promoting it. Oh yeah, the W NASCAR or whatever. It's like, because then you have women who are racing in NASCAR. It's like, well, what if,
I don't see NASCAR going down a road like this either. I think it's mainly for over in Europe.
It's rough. And then you have to bring up financials, because
Well, that's the next thing. This is a clip from David Land, who's a motorsports YouTuber, very great guy. Check him out. But he brings up the other good point, which is where are the finances coming for this series?
This is almost motorsport socialism. You've got a free-to-enter series for any woman who's qualified. On the surface, that looks fantastic. You're thinking, wow, okay, that works. That's cool. That's a great solution to the problem that there's not enough female drivers to really be competitive or be able to rise through the ranks. That's ultimately seems to be their mission statement here, the W Series mission statement. But when you look further down onto the surface, or below the surface level is all sunshine and rainbows. You look just a little bit below it, and you start to see the cracks. The cracks are the same cracks that are affecting every other motorsport in the world. And it has the color of green. Money. Where is the money coming from for this series? No major sponsorships announced. No major brand partnerships announced. No benefactors announced. And at the same time, we've got a commitment to buy 18 to 20 at least. Probably you're going to be buying about 40 of them for a primary and a backup car for each driver, theoretically. 40 Tatis F3 cars.
And where's the money coming from when there's no sponsorship? Now David Coulthard's behind this. Adrian Newey's behind this. They're both very wealthy. I don't know that they're wealthy enough to be able to shove enough of their personal finances out to cover this.
It's the same thing that NASCAR's going through right now. You can have all the best intentions at heart, but however, money talks. And ultimately, that's the one that's going to keep auto racing in general breathing. Because ultimately, auto racing is, something that, someone could do for pretty close to all their life. You obviously see guys retiring, but there's some guys in here who are like easily, pushing 60, And if
Morgan Shepherd's 70, pushing 77. He's still out in the Xfinity races every week.
And it just shows you, hey man, he's, really talented. But I feel like, right now, financially, you got to get the finances settled before you do this, because if you just jump the gun and do this improperly, it's going to fall flat on the face. It's just not going to end well. So, do it, but do it right. Because I would love to see this happen, and I would love to see this take off. However, if you do it improperly, that's where there's going to be the issue. So.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for this week's edition of the Photo Finish. Next week, NASCAR is in Kansas. Formula One actually comes here to the United States in Austin, at Circuit of the Americas. And Friday night, we have the last hashtag ARCA Night in America race of the season. Sheldon Creed's pretty much locked up the championship over there.
Well, I gotta say this though, because free speech on radio. They need to do a street series in like New York. They need to get NASCAR in like New York City. Just plowing through the streets of New York, do Boston or something like that. You kidding me? That'd be amazing.
That's been a major talking point. With the Roval, I guess, has been the closest we've seen to a street circuit in recent years in NASCAR.
Dude, you want to get people involved? Dude, put it in the streets of New York. I guarantee you'll find at least 100,000 new fans. So, all right.
Well, coming up next, Robert Gonzalez and Matt Lewis bring you all things Marvel and DC on the Comic Collision. Stay tuned for that right here on Scot Radio. I'm Ben Schneider, Chase Draus. Thank you for filling in this week. Matt Cole will hopefully be back with us next week, and we'll see you in the next episode.